Welcome to the Happy Disruptors podcast. If you're a creative thinker with an unconventional approach to your industry, you just might be a happy disruptor. Join your friends at the Great Outdoors Foundation for honest conversations about tackling critical issues like conservation with an uncritical disposition. If you like to smile and get things done, this is the podcast for you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I know we're in the post-lunch, post-snack slump, so extra gold points, gold stars to those who want to make their way to one of these center or front tables. We promise we don't bite, but so glad to have you here at this session. I'm Katie Hartman with the Great Outdoors Foundation. And before we jump in, would love for each of our panelists to share a little bit about themselves as it relates to regenerative agriculture. So Tanner, we'll start with you.
Sure, my name's Tanner Fayborg. I'm a 6th generation Iowa farmer, and our farm's going through a bit of a transition right now. We went from kind of homesteading, it's the family farm I grew up on. Started out with homesteading till I was about 9 years old, and then got into factory farming, contract factory industrial hog farming with 2 buildings, wean to finish operation. And after 30 years, I decided to make a change for many different reasons. So we're converting the buildings, the pigs are gone, converting it into growing specialty mushrooms to sell fresh produce, but also value-added products. And then as part of that, it's a demonstration hub. So we're doing all sorts of conservation efforts that looking at land usage, pollinator gardens, buffer strips, all that kind of good stuff. So trying to juggle all that at once and getting that going.
Excellent. All right, Teresa.
Hi, I'm Teresa Davis. I own West 40 Market in Ankeny. It is an all Iowa meat market, basically like a little grocery store, sourced from between 7 to 8, depending on the time of year, small to mid Iowa farmers to bring in individual cuts of beef, pork, chicken, bison, lamb, turkey, Wagyu. So customers can come in, they can shop. We also feature over 100 different Iowa-based products. We have fresh breads, all the things like that. We also ship nationwide. We do that every single week and are shipping out constantly some really good Iowa meats. So I'm kind of the end of all of this conversation. So our wonderful farmers who are raising all of this and doing all the great things, I'm able to take their hard work and basically get it out to the community every day. So,
yeah, excellent. Lisa?
I'm Lisa Kushner. I work for the Nature Conservancy and I lead our Upper Mississippi Foodscape. And the Foodscape works across parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois. I'm based out of Minneapolis. And our goal is to sort of scale and speed the adoption of regenerative agriculture practices and systems so that we can achieve all the wonderful environmental benefits that we've heard about, but also farmer economic resilience as well.
Excellent. And last but not least, April.
Hi, I'm April Heckey. I'm the program manager for In Harmony Farm. We're a nonprofit farm in central Iowa that supports up-and-coming farmers to help them grow healthy food and build thriving farm businesses. So we're located in Earlham, Iowa, which is like west of, Waukee, Adel, that past all of that. And we have a 70-acre piece of land out there. And farmers can enter our program. It's a 5-year program, and they gain access to a piece of land where they can then start farming. They're diversified vegetable producers, and then we have all the infrastructure provided for them. So there is irrigation all of the fields. There's fencing around the entire property. There's a wash pack area, coolers, just all of those big cost infrastructure. We're trying to mitigate those costs so that farmers can come in and begin farming and building their business and making a profit before they hit those big high costs. And the farmers all practice regenerative farming. So it's, all of the practices like minimal till, crop rotation, cover cropping, irrigation management, integrated pest management, that type of, all of those pieces. And then as an organization, we also implement different conservation practices on the property, including maintaining timber area, prairie, wetlands, we have a quail buffer. So just all of those pieces that help support a just really thriving ecosystem that benefits the farming, but also the greater ecosystem, improving soil health, all of those pieces. And then the last thing that we help the farmers with is just all sorts of education and technical assistance in the fields. We provide different classes and resources for them. And then we're really focusing this year on market development and how we can better help them get their produce out to the local community.
Wonderful. And as you can tell, we are so fortunate to have panelists from various points throughout the supply chain and market development process. But really thought it would be helpful, just for the purpose of today's session, to talk a little bit about what we mean by regenerative agriculture. And for our purposes, we're taking a really holistic, broad definition that encompasses, restorative soil measures, enhancing biodiversity, strengthening ecosystems, and really building those resilient food systems. So building upon your introductions, how do your organizations fit into that general concept? And we don't have to go in order. You can absolutely jump out of line.
I can go first, that's all right.
Yeah.
So for me, it came at it with more of a sustainability focus, and really feel the need that there's a need for diversification in the agricultural sector. And I think there's really a ripe opportunity to localize the food system, think more about land management, but also at the same time creating and saving more family farms and small independent farmers. I think when you have smaller operations, you think more about the land, because you live there, and it directly impacts you, directly impacts your community. So we kind of saw what we were doing, and wanted to get back to what we kind of originally wanted with the farm, which is diversification and doing different things in a sustainable way. So moving from CAFO operation to specialty mushrooms, especially using solar power that powers the whole thing, and lots of other practices. That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
I personally think I have the coolest job, because I get to not get dirty every day and just tell everybody in the community about what you guys do and all the hard work you do. But I think that for me, it's supporting the farmers who do just that, right? So when we support just the small and the mid farmers, it's the ones who don't have huge herds and are really working the land and are trying to put into practice these regenerative processes. And so we get to not only support them and help for them to continue doing what they're doing, but we also get to share that with the community. And I think you might probably get to this a little bit later, but more and more, I think our community members, our consumers are very interested in that. They want to know where their food is coming from. They want to know who's raising it, how they're raising it. And I get to explain that to them and support our farmers. And so I think I've got a pretty cool job by being able to do that, so.
So the Nature Conservancy is a very large conservation organization. We are lucky in that we have a very strong ground game. We have chapters like in every state in the country, including agriculture programs in most of the agriculture dominant states. So we have this really like grounded footing, and then we also have the ability to work on public policy at the state and federal level, to work with companies across supply chains, and different sort of technical assistance and farmer advisors. So we see our role as kind of thinking about, what are all those enabling conditions that like Rex Raymond and T and others spoke about earlier this afternoon, and how can we kind of work to line those up in one landscape, which is the Upper Midwest. So we are really trying to like enable, everyone on this stage, but also agricultural retailers, peer farmer networks, to be able to have the resources that are needed for diversification in markets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I touched on some of the pieces that we're doing in my intro, but we're also just very focused on supporting the farmers who are doing the actual regenerative work. We do have our conservation pieces, but part of that is just the education for farmers. And our farmers came in at various levels of already being aware of regenerative practices or some of it being new to them. Our particular group of farmers originally came from Burundi, East Africa, and they were farmers in their home countries. They've farmed across continents, and they came to the States looking for the opportunity to continue to farm. And there's some practices that are similar and then some that were very different for them. So I think about even just the irrigation piece. Our farmers have shared that when they were farming in Burundi, they were often just at the mercy of the weather and, drought. They really struggled during that. And so, having the infrastructure in place, but then also teaching about the irrigation management and what that looks like and how they can really think critically about how they're irrigating to best support their production is a piece that we've been able to, help educate them in. And then, cover cropping assistance. Cover crop was a new concept for them, which if you all aren't familiar with it, some may not be. It's essentially keeping living roots in the ground as much as possible, always having the soil covered so you mitigate erosion and damage to the soil, and then it also adds nutrients back into the soil. So our farmers have a rotation of, cover crop on the fields when they don't have it in production, and then otherwise it's in production. And so, but yeah, just those various pieces of regenerative farming and then our supporting conservation. A lot of it is us helping with the resources and equipment and tools necessary to implement those, but then also providing education to farmers who it might be new for them to just really learn those pathways, and then also just see the benefits for themselves. They've seen for themselves the benefit of feeding back into the soil, that they reap that year over year. The more that they put back into the soil, the more nutrients they put in. Doing soil testing and looking at those benefits, they see the outcome of it, and they're growing really beautiful vegetables. So we see that every day as well.
Yeah. So we've talked about various stages of the supply chain so far, and there's been lots of great conversation around the missing middle infrastructure for alternative and regenerative agriculture. But I want to jump ahead a little bit to markets for our producers and growers, and certainly Lisa, from what you see from sort of a national standpoint, what are some of the biggest challenges to marketing and selling these products?
I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is something I'm thinking about a lot with our farmers. So, they've done a variety of markets, and so on their own, before they came to us, they were participating in a farmers market that's very culturally focused. A lot of the African and ethnic community attends that, and so that's a place where they were selling a lot of their vegetables, and also to their own communities. They've made those connections, but then accessing a greater market and institutional markets, those pieces are, it's a big jump to go from the private or, market, farmers market type of sales to, restaurants, grocery stores, more institutional sales. I feel like some of the biggest barriers are just the infrastructure pieces. Like I talked about at our farm, we were able to put in those coolers, but for, a farmer that's just starting out, that doesn't, those are really high costs if you're putting in, all the infrastructure, coolers. Delivery is another thing. None of our farmers right now have refrigerated trucks. We don't either, so that's a little bit of a challenge for us. So I think infrastructure is a piece, but then I think also just something I think about a lot is the value added piece, because there's only so much that you can sell of fresh produce in season. And then we have a whole season, all through the winter that farmers aren't selling anything, so they have to make all of their profit during the growing season. And then, for consumers purchasing local food, purchasing regeneratively produced food in Iowa, that's not available throughout the winter unless you take steps to preserve it. And so I just feel like that's such a missing piece. And a statistic that always blows my mind is that, we have some of the richest soil in the world, and yet 85% of what we eat as Iowans is imported. And so it's like there's obviously something missing here, and we have, some farmers who are just really passionate about feeding their communities and want to do that. And so I feel like a key piece is like, how do we do that? How do we do value added? How do we do storage for that? And we've thought about it as an organization, but then, we have to think about, do we have the, we have to add infrastructure for that. We have to add staffing. And so is that we try to do that in our organization for our farmers, or is there somebody else that could step into that missing piece and build that entity that our farm and other farmers and so many people could benefit from? And I'm just like, who's out there? Is there, if there's anybody that that's really on your heart, there are so many farmers who would benefit from that being built. And I think collaboration is the key of how we're going to change the food system. Is everyone finding their lane and doing it really, really well, and then collaborating together. So.
Yeah, and I think there is a knowledge gap, and it can be really intimidating moving from commodity crops to specialty crops. And a big part of that is people think, they think, well, if you move over to creating, growing specialty crops, most people think of farmers markets and giving up their weekends and it's small scale but when you incorporate value-added products, I mean, you could have a national audience and you could have shelf-stable products, but then there's all these challenges that come with that, because I think there's, like I said, that knowledge gap. For me, starting out was, well, we need a website. Okay, who do I go for a website? What should that look like? What platform is best for that? Then there's all the rules and regulations that you need to follow for the FDA and state, regulations. And that, I feel, is such an extremely difficult, place to navigate. There's so much gray area, and you'll get so many different answers from different people, even within the same organization. And you're just trying to find out, okay, I want to grow specialty mushrooms. I want to grow in the facility, and I want to, I need my Iowa, commercial Iowa food processing plant license. And what are the plumbing requirements? What's the HVAC requirements? What, can I use plastic curtains to go around my fruiting room and the kitchen? What are the kitchen requirements? What are the labels? Yeah. Who do I go with the labels? What's the shipping look like? What's logistics? There's all these things that go into it. And that can be intimidating, and you can make lots of mistakes. But I think what worked well for us was starting small and with the bigger picture in mind, and kind of, navigating that, learning from that, learning how to grow those crops, learning how to cultivate indoor mushrooms, learning how to make those products. And then it was really surprising how much interest there was right when we started making these products. And I think a lot of people like the story too. I think they I think that goes into the business model, not just regenerative farming and not just conservation efforts, because it's the right thing to do. And I do believe in these things to my core, to my heart, but it's also, people see that and recognize that. And when they have a choice to buy similar products from, a large, corporation, or a family farm that's really trying to do the right thing, more often than not, they'll pick us. But yeah, the technical side of things and figuring all that out through e-commerce can be and is a real challenge. And like I said, yeah, the permitting and license and all of that, going through all that.
Well, and you touched on several different areas of expertise that are needed, everything from marketing to compliance to logistics. And we see a lot of those services supported by the co-op system for our traditional row crops, but we don't have quite the same wraparound services and member organizations developed yet for alternative or regen ag.
Yeah, it'd be nice. There's been a lot of talk about
more people
starting
more
it. And there are some great organizations out there. Our partner organization is called Transfarmation, and they assist farmers who want to transition away from kind of that contract industrial animal operation into a more sustainable plant-based business model. And so they did provide some, we were lucky enough, they selected us to provide some technical assistance. But even with some technical assistance, and even talking to my mushroom guru, and even, you know, having some of these things, it's still a real challenge to navigate. So I think part of it needs to be, you know, I think we kind of have a bit of a broken system, where I can't go to a place and for simple questions, and like I want to do everything the right way.
Yeah.
How do I do that? I'll go, there's all these, you know, 600-page documents, and you'll read like just about one thing I have to do. It's 600 pages, and it's all very vague language that will ultimately depend on who comes to inspect the facility and whether they say, I don't know about that, or okay, yeah, looks good.
Yeah, and you're doing all of this while taking on all of the risk, right, as you are transitioning or
working on all, you know, just all these you know, to be vertically integrated. So yeah, while you're working on the marketing and your logo and shipping and actually growing mushrooms, which is not the easiest thing in the world, you know?
Yeah.
We're tired, right? That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you get tired. Yeah, you get tired.
A lot of work.
It's motivating to, you know, to do something different and take on a challenge. And it always feels good to, you know, great to come to an event like this and see some like-minded people and talk to y'all. And so thanks for having us. But it is, yeah, it's tough. You get burnt out, you get tired, because every day it's something else. You're putting out these fires constantly while trying to improve the operations and trying to expand.
I do think it's kind of the theme of what today has been so far, is just the collaboration piece. Like it's going to take all of these people putting it together, right? And you've got, how do you transport things, and how do you store things, and how do you do this? And I've found that over the last 5 years of I've got to lean on people that just do things really well and stay in their lane and that kind of thing, right? I mean, it'd be awesome to open up my own locker, but like, no, don't have time for that. And the money and everything else. But it's, you know, I tend to, like, I'll utilize Prudent Produce. They're a co-op outside of Ankeny, and so I'll utilize like some of their cold transportation, and so they go up and do locker runs for me and get all the meat from the locker for me, you know. And but I do, you're right, there's no one spot to go for it. There's a lot of really great spots, but there's all different ones, and then they all translate things a little bit different. And so yeah, I think you guys nailed it with the exhaustive list of things.
Well, and I think, you know, our system is built for row crop commodity agriculture and livestock, and there are a lot of sort of, you know, very well tread paths there. And so how do we kind of learn from the system that has been built and adapt it for more diversified products and crops, you know? And I think there's public policies that can be broadened or tweaked to allow for that, you know, the risk mitigation products that are available for you know, corn and soybeans and a few other commodity crops. Like, how do we build that for more diverse crops? You know, technical assistance is very much adapted for corn and soybean, but how do we broaden the knowledge of, you know, ag retailers, conservation agronomists, like extension agents to provide more support for a wider variety of systems? Because we know that, you know, the more diversity we have, the more resilience we're going to have, whether that's economic or environmental.
Yeah, definitely. Teresa, earlier you touched on your interactions with the public and how much of what your business is now developed into is helping them tell this story about themselves by the products that they're purchasing. And I wonder, over the course of owning and operating West 40 Market, what trends are you seeing, or what behavior changes have you noticed on the consumer side?
Yeah, I think that more than anything, they just want to know, where their food's coming from, and they want clean, good food. I think more than anything, it's not necessarily like the practices of the farm. I really think that there's just something to be said for the fact that I can tell them who raised that or what farm that came from, and there's trust in that. They don't start, a lot of times they're not even asking, well, is it grass-fed, grain-finished? Is it, they're not asking even more specifics like that. It's just, they just want to know that it's local, that it's from a small farm. I'll be like, yeah, this one actually is from my parents' farm. And they're just, it's almost like they light up and they're like, really, that's just the coolest thing, but there's a sense of trust there. And so I think that more than anything, people are wanting to know where it comes from and who it comes from, that it's around them. It was said earlier that we live in a state that grows arguably some of the absolute best beef and pork. And it just boggles my mind that we don't all eat it. Like, why? It's so good and it's right here. Like, why is it going elsewhere? And we ship nationwide, and we have people out of the state that buy it on a regular basis because they're like, you just have the best stuff there. And it's like, I know, but living in Ankeny, it's such a big growing city like that. It's 75,000 people, and I have people come in every day that have never had farm fresh meat. And then they try it for the first time, and they come back in and they're like, well, you ruined it, right? Like, I can't go back to anything else now. I have to buy from you all the time. And they would have never had access to that. And once they get it, then they realize that there's such a big difference. And it's like, there's that immediate trust, like, this is it, right? This is how I'm going to start getting my food from now on. So I think that's really important. And the interesting thing for me too is that, I have my consumers are anywhere from 19-year-olds going to DMAC to 90-year-olds. It's just such a wide range, and it's the younger generation too is they're very much aware of their food and what they're putting on the table every day, and they care about it. And so that to me, I think, and even like being here today, like that's promising for me. Like, okay, like we're gonna be okay. But they certainly care, and I don't have to. I don't have to say anything bad about people that do it any other way, or going to a Fairway or Hy-Vees or whatever it might be to shop. The media does a good job at making sure people know that where their stuff is coming from, or showing videos of certain areas that I think consumers are like, oh, wait a minute, like that's where that comes from. That's what's happening there. So yeah, there's definitely a trust there when you can tell them that it's just from a small farm right up the road kind of deal.
Yeah.
Reminds me of just a quick little story. We had some people at the farm not too long ago that I think they're from Minneapolis and had never been on a farm before, and they had these little kids. And we have a fruit orchard with like apples and pears and things. And this kid thought it was really cool and wanted to know like is that edible? Like, can you eat that? I'm like,
no way.
Yeah, you can eat it. Just pull it off the tree and eat it. What do you mean?
Wow.
Just take it from the tree. Here you go. Eat it. Mm-hmm. And then he just, bit into that apple and was just amazed. I think there is a kind of a disconnect more and more between where food actually comes from, and there's less and less choice because we're losing a lot of independent farms. I mean, a lot of the farms that I grew up next to are gone. With the land prices the way they are, older generation, the average age of a farmer is, I don't know what it's old, it's getting up there, and as farmland is being passed down, people don't want to do kind of the same sort of farming, and it's really tempting if you inherit land and you could sell it for millions of dollars, and then often large entities or corporate ag come in and take down the whole acreage, the old house, all that history, and then you have this dwindling out of these rural areas and small towns, and just constant population loss. And with that, you have less and less consumer choice and less localized food system. And I think that's what that's obviously what we're talking about, getting back to those things.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge cultural shift. Just a generation or two ago, we had much more maybe sustenance farming models where our grandparents or maybe great-grandparents were raising, kind of hobby farm animals to provide for their families, or growing small crops on their property. I wonder, April, with the demographic that you work with, what are some of the takeaways that we can kind of reintroduce into our everyday life so that we are more connected with our food system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I don't know, like something that keeps coming up for me is convenience, because sorry, this is kind of touching another question, but for people, even if they have they have choices, if they search it out, they have the choice to eat local, but so much comes down to convenience. And so being able to access food, one-stop shop, that type of thing. But there is so much value though in searching it out, to eat local, to know where your food's coming from. One thing I see with our farmers is just such a passion about what they're doing. They truly believe in caring for the land. They truly believe in growing food that feeds not just their own families, but feeding their communities. They'll often, give food away as well. That's part of their normal, they're trying to sell food, they're trying to make a profit, but they're also giving away food. And so they just really believe so strongly in local community, in feeding their neighbors, and just, that's just such a meaningful, valuable piece. And I feel like I kind of lost the train of your question. If you could rephrase it, I can continue down that path.
I think that you did a great job touching on it. Just, some of the examples or lessons or takeaways that, it seems to be so integrated in the community that is a part of In Harmony Farm. And seems we have lost so much of that within just our American culture, but I think you've covered that really well.
I was just going to tack on another cool thing that we've seen our farmers be able to do is we've been able to develop some relationships with local food banks, and that's been such a beautiful way of doing cooperative sales where they're all participating and selling. But then the food bank is purchasing from our producers throughout the season. They're getting local food into the hands of people that probably wouldn't be able to access food just because of the costs and location, being able to find it. And so that's been really meaningful for our organization, for the farmers to know their food is getting into the hands of people that really need it and value it. And it's the nutritional value, it's the local value, and all of that. So there's a lot of cool things happening in small ways.
Well, and I think farmers, whether they're very small amounts of land or large commodity farmers, more and more want a diversity of revenue streams, whether that's the crops that they're growing or these sort of stacked revenue sources, getting payments from Soil Water Outcomes Fund for carbon or water or other things. I think the pandemic, trade disputes between countries, we're seeing more and more risk with our current system. And so if you can diversify your what you're growing and who you're selling it to, you're mitigating your risk. Now, that requires markets for all of those revenue streams, and it requires the sort of enabling conditions of crop insurance and finance and everything that we've heard about to be in place to be able to access those diversified markets. So I think, that wanting to grow food for the community, but also, be able to access different markets depending on what's going on sort of nationally and internationally is more and more important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Tanner, were you going to add
Yeah,
that?
I think something that might be underlooked and talking about diversifying your own revenue stream, I think, which is something that we really focus on and try to do. And one of that is ag tourism. I think to really make that connection to get people into rural Iowa and rural America. I think ag tourism could be a big piece of that puzzle. I know quite a few farmers who are actually, they started, out with, transitioning to specialty crops, and then, they got into ag tourism, and they have some yurts in the pasture and some, kind of cool things like that. We have a big silo at the farm that's overlooking the pond that was once a lagoon with animal waste. And I'd love to retrofit that into, this big kind of short-term stay. But I know people who are actually making more money from that than the produce that they sell. And then it's also just giving those people, like for me, sometimes in farmers, like you underestimate this disconnect, and some people have never seen where their food comes from. They've never been on a farm. So I think if we build up that infrastructure as well, and just talk about that, I think that's a piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, it seems like we've touched on this theme of storytelling and education and outreach a few different times. What role does that play in sort of the long-term viability for whether it's specialty crops or agritourism, or building these alternative markets that we've been discussing?
I think it's huge. I mean, for us, that's without that storytelling, without that kind of compelling narrative, we definitely wouldn't be where we are. There's been just a lot of enthusiasm throughout the country, and we're fortunate enough to be on the front page of the New York Times, which is really exciting, which before that sales were pretty slow, and then that article came out, and then
That'll do it.
and then we had that ping on my phone for if a sale came through, and then every once in a while we're like, all right, we got a sale, and that came through, and it's ding 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 ding. But getting out there and really telling that story, and making that story and having fun with it, like you got to enjoy what you do too. I think that's for people who are thinking about a change, think about it like, are you going to enjoy the process? Because if you're not having fun, if you're not having some fun doing it, I don't think you're ultimately going to succeed. If you have fun doing it, you're going to create all these moments and fun and funny moments and crazy moments. Like our pond had a leak in it the other day, like last week, in the clay base. So I'm thinking, how am I going to fix this? Well, I need to get down there and put some bentonite clay, but I got to find that hole. How am I going to do that? Well, I better buy scuba diving gear. And
Did you document this for social media?
An underwater camera and a light, and so I just full on bought all the scuba diving gear. So now I'm scuba diving in the pond, and I'm like, oh, this would be great too, because I wanted to install these things for the catfish, and we stocked it with fish, and I'm like, I want to do this and this, and I'm like, so you find there's problems, but it's you could find fun and compelling ways to solve those problems that people are interested in.
Yeah.
And then but then you need to tell that story, and then you get into the marketing and videography, and that's a whole different thing. That knowledge gap, and then you think about, oh, I need to hire this marketing firm, I need to do this, and how do I do this, and it can be a challenge.
Yeah. And for those of you who had scuba suit on your Watershed 26 bingo card, you can collect your prize after this session.
I think it's a really important way for us to connect ourselves, right? So you've got a generation or a couple older generations that are starting to leave us, right? And you have the younger generation that has no idea what a farm is. They have no idea where their food actually comes from and what all goes into that. And so I kind of look at us, I don't know how old you are, but I would think we're there, right? But I look at us as kind of the people that are going to connect that for them, right? So we have to tap into the technology and the TikToks and all that, but like, how do we make it so that it's educational? How do we make it so that they're like, wait a minute, I'm learning something by being here, you know? I'm watching this guy fix something on his farm in scuba gear or whatever it might be. But I think that that's really important for us to communicate that and connect that piece for so many people of this is where it comes from. This is actually what does happen. It puts trust into it then, right? If that's their food source, and it's also making it fun, and you're tapping into their social media or whatever they happen to be scrolling on their phone too. So.
And just the transparency too. I think that's important. To be fully transparent about how you're doing things, what your operations look like, and I think that's important.
Definitely. Lisa, did you have something to add?
I think regenerative agriculture is the story really depends on the audience, but I think it's, there's so many benefits to it. And so if your audience is, water quality and public health and drinking water and cancer risk, regenerative agriculture is part of the solution. If your, audience is really concerned about small family farms and know where your food comes and, rural livelihoods, like regenerative agriculture is part of the solution. And I think we need to get better at telling the story, but also get better at reaching out to different audiences that, maybe aren't making all those connections just yet. If we can knit together all those different audiences, then I think there's just a much bigger coalition for getting the changes that need to happen out there and broadly welcomed by the public.
Yeah, that's something that we do as a piece of our organization, is just the community outreach and education piece as well. And so we've been able to do some cool collaborations with schools coming out and getting to tour the farm, but then also participating. So we had a high school class that they got the whole tour, and then they got to help put down cover crop. So just very tangibly, they think there's something for kids about actually being able to, to physically do the thing. We've had some kids out to plant trees in an apple orchard area. So I think things like that, especially we've talked a few times, we've touched on the next generation and just that awareness and connection to farming and where food comes from, which is so important that that's passed down. And then, who knows what kid shows up to one of these farms here and is like, I want to do that. And I think that's a big missing piece, is who is the next generation of farmers? And I think we do see that there's a lot of interest from young people in small specialty farms. And so again, the reason why the systemic changes and infrastructure changes are so important, because I think that's where we're going to see the next generation of farmer coming in, is they get to taste of a little bit of some form of farming that really ignites their passion. And so I think that, those of us who are currently involved in farming and supporting farmers have the opportunity to help share that and bring those people in, because, we need the next generation that's going to step into this.
Absolutely. We have just a few minutes left, but I do want to make sure that we take some time to uplift some of the organizations that are playing a critical role in this whole conversation. We've touched on a few of them that have provided either wraparound services or have engaged sort of at the individual level to enable all of you to do the work that you're doing. Are there any case studies or examples that we can point to of some work being done in this space for others to learn from?
I think Rex mentioned it in an earlier panel, but there's a lot of work happening in Northeast Iowa and Southeast Minnesota about sort of rebuilding oats markets. And there's, hundreds of farmers that have banded together. They're supported by Practical Farmers of Iowa, lots of like Olmsted County Soil Water Conservation District. I mean, there's just a lot of organizations that have been working to support development of that. There's like financiers like Steward Capital, and so that has been many years in the making, and there's like dozens and dozens of organizations. But I think that's like a good example of where there is momentum and coalescence around a vision.
One of my favorite partnerships I like to talk about is one we have with the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation. And so our farmers, when they enter the program, they come in as it's a 5-year opportunity, but sort of the big question is what's next for them. And that's something we're still in the process of developing out, but we were able to do a pilot of that with 3 of our farmers when we signed a 20-year lease with INHF. And they, of course, do conservation work, especially prairie work. And so they had a large swath of land in Cambridge, Iowa, and a portion that was suited for crop production. And so they leased that to us, and we're able to move 3 of our farmers to that piece of land. And the intention is that's a longer term piece of land. So those farmers, they're moving to a bit more independence. And then they also know they're going to be there for a long time. And so, even more what they put into the soil, they're going to reap the benefits year over year. They can start, looking at some of investing in more infrastructure, knowing that, they're going to be there. They're not going to have to move. So organizations that provide land access are I think, really important. That's also one of the things I'm thinking about all the time is like the land for beginning farmers is so hard to access. And because most of our farmlands that are still left were, commodity crops, if you're, putting up the specialty crop or a specialty farm, you need way different infrastructure. You need water, you need electricity, you need, all the things that I talked about that In Harmony Farm puts in for our farmers. Like farmers need to put those pieces in, and they're huge costs, huge upfront costs. And so, I think land access piece is a really interesting problem for us all to solve collectively of how we can really support beginning farmers to be able to access land, what they need, in ways that they can afford and build their business. And so, INHF was a great way for us to partner with them to take one step in that process. And there are other organizations out there. We haven't, we work with them. We haven't transferred any farmers to them, but SILT is another organization that they're working with landowners to put land in trusts, and they have different ways of doing it. It's kind of, partnership with each landowner and what they want to see with their land, but they're looking to make those connections and those pass-offs to the next generation of farmers. And so there's a lot of really good organizations out there doing really good work. I mentioned Food Bank of Iowa has been a great partnership of ours. DMARC, we've done some work with, and then Waypoint Resources is a new one we're working with. So, food banks working with the local food system is a really awesome thing as well.
Definitely. Tina or Teresa, any other closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, those are great organizations that I was going to mention. Yeah, SILT and INHF and Transformation. Like I said, they really helped us get started, and we're still partners with them today. And as part of the demonstration hub, so what we're trying to do is collect all this data and share it, and be very transparent about everything, and keep track of every cost. And things can be really expensive with this, starting operations like this. But sometimes they don't have to. Sometimes I think a lot of things can be scalable, and that's something that I didn't think right when we started that. I thought, okay, this is just going to be this massive endeavor and a lot of money, and then I thought, well, we could start small and then make a profit. We were able to make a profit, and then that money from the original setup went into the construction of the retrofit of the hog barn and conservation efforts and things like that. So, yeah, Transformation, check them out. The Great Outdoors Foundation, they do great work, obviously. And there's a lot of good people out there. Iowa State's doing a lot of good stuff. Obviously, NRCS and the EQIP program that's still going strong, and their DNR, state forestry There's a lot of good people out in Iowa that's willing to help.
Yeah, I think the key is collaboration, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like any one individual or organization would be able to take this on their own, and certainly it takes a lot of highly specialized and qualified experts who are able to step in those gaps. So thank you all for sharing so openly and personally. This is obviously deeply important to all of you, so we're so glad to have heard from you during today's panel. And thank you all for being here.